Moment. Hi there, everybody. Welcome to the fourth Binge Live show. Hooray! You may note that Chris and I do not have our guest here yet. We are kind of going live prior to the guest, but that's okay.
Show business,
it's
man.
Showbiz.
We have to liven it up anyway. So these kind of drama, this is the stuff in reality shows where they're like throw the curveballs at the last minute.
So, we got stuff to talk about, so we'll talk about it. And hopefully our guest, Linda Pinkow, also our colleague, will come in and we could have the scheduled show. Otherwise,
we're just talking about doing videos, and here we are doing videos. And anybody who's just watching this, here, if you found it on Facebook, we're kind of going. It's not that Jason and I are anti-video. Certainly, BINJ has done video over the years, but we are going video crazy, really just to disseminate the stories that we're doing and to tell people about what BINJ is doing. And it's been going really well. So not just here, but check us out on YouTube, subscribe to the BINJ YouTube page. And, BINJ is going to have a new website launching soon. So if you don't, if you're just hanging and you don't have to write the notes down, if you're in your car listening to the recording of this, just keep it in mind, you'll be seeing us, you'll be hearing more from us, and we have a lot of announcements. Jason, should I give them that big announcement while we wait for Linda? Or
well, Linda's here, so let's. I mean, at least her voice maybe is. Linda, can you speak to us? We do not hear or see you, but we see that there is a Linda Pinkow that's here on screen. Difficulty at beginning. Let me.
Linda's also in the news. We could talk about her while we wait for her to come on. But Linda's in the news this week.
Oh yeah, I forgot to put that up.
I put it on our social media, so you can check it out on any of the BINJ socials. But Linda, of course, also works with WMBR, which is near and dear to, of course, her heart, but to those a lot of our readers and people in the Cambridge community. Of course, the MIT radio station, and they're doing a news program again. And of course, Linda's involved. Linda has written for not just BINJ, of course, but many. She's going to kill me for butchering this. Sorry, I'm like watching you. For several publications in the area. And really, this is the kind of person you want doing your news. So here we are in, coming up on Pledge Week or Pledge Month, doing, promo for other nonprofits. But if there's anyone worth it, it's WMBR, which has done, had a solid news program for a long time, many years with Linda involved. And I've been interviewed on there a few times. And I got to say, a lot of people don't realize that, through a lot of this nonsense, we all complain about how bad commercial media is, me being one of the main complainers. But there's a lot of stuff going on. And if you look, it's there. And if you're in the Cambridge area, Somerville, that whole north of the Charles River area, I highly recommend checking out WMBR. But there's also an article in Cambridge Day today about it. So check out Cambridge Day, which you should be reading regularly if you're up in that region. Anyway, are you waiting on me, or what's going on here?
Well, I don't know. I see that Linda's tried to come in. I see her lower third. I see LP, but I see no person, and I hear nothing. I have texted Linda, our guest, to ask what is up, but I don't know. So perhaps because she's using her phone to try to get in, she may not be able to respond to text at this juncture. So, Chris, why don't you talk about our upcoming?
I will. So I have a little. I'm probably
fundraiser.
This is one of the flyers. Also a flyer with the performers, but we are doing. So as some people know, it's the BINJ 10-year anniversary. We've actually been. It's unbelievable that we've been doing this for 10 years.
I know, right?
I always sound like I feel like I'm running for Congress when I say they told us we wouldn't be able to do it, and we did it.
We did.
And here I am, and every teacher said I was stupid. But you know what? A lot of people did think we were crazy, and maybe we were, maybe we are. But we've managed to do it and bring a whole lot of people along for the ride, and a lot of them.
There we go.
Here's one of them right now. But yeah, so we're gonna have an event, and it is we decided that we were going to have a guest, but of course, no matter what guest that was, there was something wrong.
We
With
can see you, Linda, by the way, so you're at least on.
yes,
Sorry, Chris. Good.
and
Okay. Oh, she's
and we
gone.
ultimately decided that we're going to do a comedy show, but not just any comedy show, a roast, and a roast of the media, a roast of the news. So we basically invited, a lot of our comedian friends. We're going to have Cher Lynn, Will Noonan, and many others. There's going to be like 8 comics, or several 6 or 7 comics. Some other friends. Luke O'Neill is going to be there from Welcome to Hell World, a frequent BINJ collaborator, an old friend. It's really good. It's going to be. I say this not in a way of like an after school special fun, although it is a daytime event, because I think I think it's going to be great. It's going to be 2 to 4 on November 8th. And I think the daytime it's going to be a totally unique kind of thing. Jason, it's at First Parish in Cambridge.
First Parish Church First Parish Church in Harvard Square, and we're going to have the. I think it's going to be an Eventbrite up very shortly.
Yeah, we'll have it up this week, so definitely we've announced to save the date. This is announcing what it is. We handed out some flyers yesterday just because I was out and about, but that now you know. So it's a comedy show, and you will see this. It's going to be in your face. We'll be emailing you. We're going to make sure people get there. We're really excited about it, and also we're going to have an auction. And this is not really auctions. This is just actually, since I've been going through archives and donations for the auction, I've also found a lot of like great BINJ exclusives and articles BINJ has done in our first 10 years. Here's one in Worcester Magazine. Awesome series on SWAT teams, on SWAT raids this was really just unbelievable stuff. SWAT raids in the area, but on the wrong houses. So basically, I think it kind of speaks for itself. But one thing that I will never forget about that feature, which here it is, I just want to make sure I get all the credits right. Seth Kirshner wrote it. Really unbelievable unbelievable piece. Was when we talked to the Worcester police and told them that they had, gone into so many homes that weren't even the right homes that they were, thought they were going into, and that there have been children in those homes. Their response to us was that, well, in those neighborhoods, whatever's going on in those homes is probably, bad anyway. Like the lack of remorse was just so savage. But really just unbelievable work. So that was a fun one. Another one, I get some of my old stuff from before BINJ. Here's Shit Boston Cops Say from the Phoenix Classic. That was about the Boston Police's racist union newsletter. This will be something that we will have at our auction. This is the first ever issue of the Dig when it was called when it was called Shovel, 1998. So that's a classic. I don't know if we have any of these to spare, and certainly that would have to be a high auction item. But that is the legendary Dig cover with that caused much controversy back in 2005. So 20-year. Whoa! It's this week. 20 years ago. Wow, that's crazy.
Chris, you see what I just did? I don't know if you could see that, but I was able to mirror or unmirror your video.
Oh, cool,
so now people can actually read the Dig up there. There you go.
Well, we're learning. We're learning on the job, right? So
on the job. And Linda's got to work around Chris, so we hopefully will be seeing her and hearing her shortly. But continue.
By the way, that classic photo that you're looking at, by the way, is by Kelsey Bennett, who is a very talented photographer and artist, and is also Tony Bennett's granddaughter, for what it's worth.
Wow.
Anthony DiBenedetto's granddaughter.
Wow.
So, but that was a legend. This is 20 years ago. So that's actually I gotta do something with that. So, and then here's, of course, one of our frequent collaborators, Spare Change. Props to Spare Change.
There you go. Yeah.
A lot of BINJ clips in there. Here is some of our opioid reporting that we've done over the years. This was we've done stuff even across the country. Really one of the first. We were some of the first people.
Yes.
Hello.
Hey. All right.
Okay.
Linda, I'm going through some of our
my tech support.
I'm going through some of our print collaborations from the first 10 years.
Yeah, he
Cool.
was just
So,
running through
yeah.
different stuff where we've,
Here's a Boulder
syndicated.
Weekly. I have a bunch of sampans. Some of our stuff
It's
that ran
good.
in
I thought
English.
I was afraid you were doing a commercial for fentanyl.
No,
That was-
just
Oh, no,
just a
definitely not.
commercial for binge. So here's it. We ran a bunch of stuff that ran in English and Chinese and sampan. Let's see. Oh, here's from Metro. Who remembers the Boston Metro? We had some.
Me-
Had articles in the Metro when that was around. Here's something. We did. We really were some of the first to write about fentanyl around the country, and a lot of places this is from all the way out in California. They've syndicated our coverage. Here's that Worcester magazine piece I just talked about by Seth Kirshner on SWAT raids here. And finally, for now at least, here is the Pilgrims, which is a dedicated, basically a book, a beautiful big print publication about 850 years of anti-nuclear mass and oral history, done by Miriam Wasser, who's now at WBUR. So this is a little bit of history. We'll have some of that, and some really cool older stuff in our auction at our event. We're going to have a lot of items. It's going to be fun, and that auction will start online before the event. So just stay tuned. Make sure you subscribe to Binge,
Yep.
and you'll get all the heads up on that stuff.
All you got to do, folks, is if you put your phone up to the screen here and check out the QR tag we always have in the corner of our video, and you can get right to binge.news if that's like too hard for you to type. I mean, I don't know, but just in case. So we are happy as Chris holds up our sign, our new.
Yes. And I promise to stop drawing
fundraiser sign.
everything.
No, don't.
I illustrated my own piece today and had a few funny emails about it from friends. And I've also illustrated our flyer. I've just been drawing a lot. It helps me. I get very busy, and sometimes I just can't write anymore. Anyway,
Okay, so
yeah, Linda, hey.
yeah, we are glad to welcome Linda Pinkow, who's WMBR News Director and also BINJ Development Director, and to talk about
Get around.
like WMBR News. There's now a local news show again on a station that you've been working with for over, is it around 20 years now or more than that?
It's over 30 years.
I was wondering. I didn't.
Wow. Time flies when you work for free.
Well,
WMBR
tell us about
is an all-volunteer radio station based at MIT. I don't know what you said before because I was
not much
able to get in, but okay. WMBR's been around almost 65 years, believe it or not. We're celebrating that sometime soon. And it's almost time for our fundraiser, but WMBR.org, and you can see all the great stuff that we do and listen live or stream it and all that. Hey, there it is.
Yeah, there it is.
Website.
Yeah.
Yes. It's mostly a music station, and there's occasional talk shows, but we've always had a news show. I think the news show started before I got there in 1990. I think it was the beginning, the lead up to Gulf War I. And people in the community wanted to hear Pacifica News, which at the time was the best leftist news network around, and they had a daily half-hour newscast, and people advocated to get that show on the air, and that ran for more than 10 years on the station until it shut down. Pacifica Network it was a very important network for the left in this country. It was based in pacifism after World War II, and they have wonderful radio stations in New York and LA, San Francisco, Houston, and DC, and they have big listenerships. But the station, how it is, not enough money, sectarian disagreements.
Sectarian disagreements at a radio station?
I'm really fascinated by it, Linda. Linda, is there a good documentary, or I'm sure there's got to be a couple of books, anything that you recommend? Because Pacific is something that was making its kind of last rumbles during Occupy when I was naturally in those circles, and there was a lot of that, and it came up a lot, and I'm familiar. With some of the. Is a lot of shortwave involved.
No,
It
mm-mm.
was all. It was all.
It was always FM,
It was
but
always FM.
so they owned 5 stations, but then they put together a network all across the country of
Yep.
probably close to 100
Wow.
community stations, and so they would share programming, and they had the daily newscast. Um,
Right.
Amy Goodman, Democracy Now! Was on there, of course, although she got way beyond them. They still exist, the Pacifica Foundation. You can pacifica.org. You can look it up, and they're there, and they still produce some good programming, and they distribute a lot of programming that's good, but they're not producing a daily newscast anymore. So when well, they actually they had so many problems that there was a split off, and there was a new program that was sort of half affiliated with them and half opposed to them, called
Uh,
Free Speech Radio News, and that was
oh yeah.
around for a long time.
Right, right.
And then that shut down too. So at that point, sometime, I don't know, 15 years ago, give or take, don't quote me on that. But whenever they shut down, we started doing our own thing, and we had been doing local news on a on and off basis for years. Sort of, when we had it, when we had the time. Did I mention that we're all volunteers at
Yeah, you
WMBR?
did. That
Yeah,
was
yeah,
one of
we
the things
did. Yeah.
I left out, so I appreciate it.
Doing news without money is not a thing that works well. Journalism
No.
requires time and effort, and that means funding. You can't do real news. Well, we're trying, but you can't do a significant amount of real journalism without the time and the money that it takes to
Right.
pay professional journalists who know what they're doing.
And yet you're
There's
doing it.
nowhere in it. And yet we're doing it. Well, we do 30 minutes a week.
That's a
We'll see
lot.
how
I
that
mean,
Yeah. So what's the
Uh,
it is.
format?
It's 2 stories. So we start with 3 to 5 minutes of headlines, and then 2 stories, a 10-minute and a 8-minute or something, and maybe a public service announcement in between.
Who gets to do those stories?
We have a variety of people involved with WMBR who either have a journalism background, work in journalism professionally in their free time when they're not volunteering with us,
Hmm.
like myself, and others, or who just, know something about journalism. And I'm the editor, so I've been an editor for basically all my life. I've been an editor. That's an interesting thing. Even in high school, I used to edit my friends' papers and stuff. So I've always loved being an editor, but I became an audio editor in college, working at the college radio station. So I've been doing audio editing since the days of tape and razor blades.
I was going to say we're
So
both old enough to have that background. Yeah. So-
Linda, can I before we get too far away from the comments about volunteering, because I'm really just fascinated by this. And by the way, it goes without saying, I think that what Jason has experience with other organizations, but what Jason and I have found with really BINJ is not that we're looking for volunteers, but it just doesn't work if you're paying some people at the same
yeah.
time. We do see Boston Compass. We have seen organizations do it and go the distance, and you would be an example. But I gotta say that, I'm from Queens, and in Long Island, not in the city, but out in Nassau and Suffolk, they have volunteer firefighters. And I think, there are a lot of, people out there who would say, if we can trust our lives, and we can, I have friends and family, cousins who have been volleys. If we can trust our lives to volunteer firefighters, certainly the, nerdy business of journalism can be left to volunteers. I see why that makes sense, and I also, from experience, know why it doesn't. I'd like to know, what. Let's get philosophical. Let's stop being journalists for a second. We're doing a television show here. What do you think? I mean, in a perfect world, how would it look? I don't know. Tell me about volunteering in journalism.
I know I'm an urban person, but I'd be awful scared if I was in a town with volunteer firefighters. I realize it works all over this country. And I know firefighting is just so socialist and everything, and we don't like it here in this country. And I mean, I could go on. I was a local journalist for many years at for-profit news organizations, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for the firefighters, but they sure are treated badly. I mean,
Mm,
their cancer rate is off the charts.
it's a good
Sure.
point.
Yeah.
They never get the funding that they deserve.
Mm.
So comparing us to them, I don't think that they're in a good position either. And
Interesting. Well
all
put.
firefighters should be much better paid than they are, and none of them should be volunteers. But that's just my opinion, and
No,
not
but like a true, that's very info. That's a great perspective. I like that a lot. Yeah. So it doesn't work
And
no matter. It doesn't work in either situation. Is the
you're
unfortunate answer.
you're
you can
getting to
make it
your
work, right? I mean, they go and they do what they have to do, and they put out fires and they save folks' lives every day. I'm sure volunteer firefighters do wonderful work, but it's fair, and it would be better if they were paid, because then they could put more attention into it, spend more time, get more training. You can imagine what they could
Yeah.
do if it was a 40-hour a week job with pay and benefits.
so
Why that
we
isn't the case? Well, this is a messed up society.
but you are getting to elements of the biography we were going to start with of you. So what should the folks
I have
out
never
there
been a
know?
firefighter. I'm way too
Linda
old
has
to do that.
not been a firefighter. That's an important
Not
piece of
my
biographical
I've done a
information,
lot of things, but I haven't done that. And I'm
including
old.
journalism, as you were saying. And what kind of journalism did you do?
Oh, Oh, I worked for what is now Gannett, but not when it was Gannett.
Right.
I worked for community newspaper company, which owned most of the small community papers throughout eastern Massachusetts.
Yep.
And I, did copy editing for them. And then I was a community editor and worked in a bunch of towns in Metro West and, the greater Boston area. Most of the time in Belmont, which was a great
Mhm.
experience because it was the town where the governor's mansion was located, because
Right, Romney.
Governor Mitt Romney lived there in his mansion. So, but there was a lot going on in that town. And I learned a lot about zoning. How important is zoning? Who knew, right?
It's extremely important.
I came with a background in comparative international socioeconomic development, and I fell in love with zoning issues
Right.
because, on the local level, that's how the community decides what you can build and where you can build it. And so that's extremely important. And planning is great. I had legal issues. I learned all of those things, and I think it's critically important for individual people's lives. And everything happens on the local level ultimately.
And this part of your career was happening when you were getting involved with WMBR, I guess.
All of that true. Yes, I was there for. I've been there for over 30 years. A lot has changed technologically, but we carry on. And MIT has been super supportive. I got to say,
Hmm.
it's a good school. It's a pretty darn good school.
When it puts
And
its mind to it, yeah.
It's okay.
we'll see how things turn out, since
I
they're
mean,
currently under attack by the Trump administration.
they are. And
Yes,
I
they
was going
are.
to say, over the years, I was a guest in your show many times. And for the folks who haven't been to the station, I believe from the photo I saw in the Cambridge Day piece on the new news show, that it's still in the same basement location, still in the Walker, I guess it is, the cafeteria, the
It
old
is a very
cafeteria.
old building. It is a
Yeah,
very old building on the edge of the river. Hopefully it won't be swept away someday.
hopefully not. But it's, idiosyncratic and interesting. I don't know exactly what it looks like inside now. I assume there's still like 2 studios or whatever. But
Sure.
it was always an interesting place to go and, hang out and talk to you and other folks, like,
The interesting thing about it compared to other college radio stations is that approximately more or less half of the people who belong to the station who do DJing or whatever technical work, all the other things that it takes to make a radio station, around half of them are not students
right,
or even alumni of MIT. So, because what happened, I think, was when it first started in 1961, they were on the air in the morning and in the evening, but the MIT students were too busy during the day with their classes. They do work hard, still true. So there was nobody to do the airtime during the day. They would just shut off the air, shut off the station. But the FCC doesn't generally like that. There are
right.
rules about if you have a broadcast license, you need to actually be using it during the
Yep.
day. So they decided to let in some community members, and it blossomed. WMBR was extremely important in the history of punk rock music nationally and not just locally. And hip hop, the station was incredibly important in the history
Can
of
I
hip.
give a shout out to Dana
Yeah.
Scott, please? Can I give a shout out to my dude Dana? I spent many hours, and I got it. I got it. It's just a special place. I saw someone recently who I used to see there, and this is a place where you can have a show where you just do, 3 hours of songs from the first half of 1982 that start with the letter R. Like that. That's the kind of thing. But yeah. So
And
definitely a special place.
what
And
kind
we
of
do
audience?
everything, right? Every genre is represented, from African music to, loud rock, to all different sorts of jazz and everything in between. A lot of K-pop this year because the kids like that,
Oh
apparently.
dear, yeah, I understand they do.
The
I,
friends
I,
that I talked to were all into K-pop, so
That's cool.
definitely hearing more of
and
that this year.
we've talked about this among ourselves before, but what kind of audience does the station have? I mean, it remains eclectic and interesting. Now it has a news show. It is terrestrial radio, of course. It's also digital, pioneer in that regard, I believe. But who do you think listens to it?
Well, we have an extremely diverse listenership, you know. Then I don't know that there are a lot of young people listening to radio in general,
Right,
but and MIT students don't necessarily notice it that much. I think more, it depends on how much the students do outreach to their peers.
Mm.
But
right,
our listenership, the station, the signal travels from Cambridge, Boston, pretty much all over Greater Boston. There are a few kind of dead zones, but for the most part, it's everywhere within Route 128,
wow,
and then it inches up north. I find it can make it up to Nashua.
wow.
um, but on the other hand, we're streaming live and archived for 2 weeks on our website. So I have listeners on the West Coast and, everywhere. So,
How about
um,
on campus? Are there places that just play? I'm sure there's coffee shops, this and that. But is there any that you know of, like where it's always kind of like out of a movie, always playing on the speaker at How about the cafe? Is there still the cafe above the radio station? Is that still there?
There's a bar.
the
A bar?
bar,
Yeah.
they don't let us in anymore. So it's hard to say. I have a funny
Why?
little story about that. We used to go there. In fact, sometimes we would even broadcast out of
Yeah, I
there.
used to go there all the
Right,
time. That's not
right.
cool.
Me too.
Yeah, no, I guess, pandemic era, MIT got very paranoid about
Oh,
non
wow,
Outsider.
non-students coming, and they really, well, we were actually shut out for 3 years. We were
wow.
just remotely broadcasting,
Ah,
which some of us still do remotely broadcast. I think more and more people are heading back into the station to do live radio. Um, but that's another story. As far as the listeners, vary tremendously. A lot of people who like indie rock gravitate to MBR because it's really the best in Boston. So if you're listening to terrestrial radio, it's the best opportunity. Not dissing WZBC, which is at Boston College. It's a great station, but our indie pop and indie rock and post punk and loud rock music is pretty well known. Certainly, we have the Breakfast of Champions from 8 to 10 a.m., followed by Late Risers Club from 10 to noon. And those two blocks are extremely popular.
Mm.
So a lot of that. And then we've got the 60s and 70s show, Lost and Found, which is noon to 2 every weekday. And so those shows are mostly done by non-students, and they take up 6 hours a day on the weekdays. The weekends tend to be more eclectic, and every hour is something completely different. It's fun. Ultimately the excitement is that the people who are programming it, the DJs and announcers, are allowed to do what they want. There's no clock, there is no list of things that you can and can't play.
Wow.
It's just about being creative with music and talk and whatever it is that you're putting out there.
It's ironic because this is like what was so great about radio at the beginning, or at least in the beginning of freeform radio. And oh no, even before this, things were cool before the '60s, I suppose. But this was what was so cool about the medium, right? Especially when it came into its own. And then, of course, commercial radio ruined everything, as many would argue. And now we have access to anything, and we can listen to stations like MBR in multiple ways. The same way we can listen to everything, and yet many, including myself often, although lately I've been listening to old mixtapes on cassette, but because I kind of just love that spot. I love the radio era. I still do listen to terrestrial radio, including MBR. So my buddy Scott, who I do vintage magazine nerd stuff with, is a huge MBR fan, and he's all he does is talk about college radio, and it's still for those, well, because it lives and breathes, and I think it's interesting. That's what a lot of people are addicted to Instagram for, and TikTok, and meanwhile we've had it all along, and especially when things are happening in the world, that music may not always do that, but just to hear somebody else who may have something to say about it. And I think with the news program, it's great because we hear it all the time, and we certainly hear it in Cambridge. There's just not enough. We can't, people want to know. There's never the problem is never that people don't want to know, and I can't stand when I hear that. It's nonsense, and it's just the chicken or the egg. But in this case, I think it's the chicken.
And the news show is going to play more than once a week, or just when you're broadcasting it.
Mondays, 5:30 to 6. That's
Gotcha.
what we're doing. And it's a half hour. The NPR stations do much more, but we do something very different. We come at it from a different perspective. We we target, and we are focused on stories that aren't heard on NPR stations. We focus in on communities that are marginalized and stories that don't get reported, for the most part. But that's hard. Sometimes
Yes.
it's easier things come up too. I don't think that the program is going to be all doom and gloom, even if we are in a doom and gloom environment right now. But we also want to report on organizations and efforts to do good things, positive developments. So it's not going to be all things falling apart, but we're working on a piece. Somerville is struggling in Davis Square right now, and there was a big community meeting on Monday night where the lame duck mayor
Yep.
and the remaining two candidates for mayor and the mayor's staff all got up there and tried to explain why Davis Square has so many homeless people,
Yep.
drug addicts, open air drug use, people, doing things in the street that are not appropriate. And there are a lot of people that are angry about that. And of course, people in Somerville also understand that people who are unhoused need support and compassion. And so they're trying to figure out how to balance that. And I always find that quite interesting because no one's got the answer to this, but it's better not to, bulldoze people's possessions.
No, and I'll
Right.
tell you, this is something that always comes up. It's I often write, and it comes up with with Boston with Melania Cass. Well, I think it's like 20% of the state's opioid. I was just looking at these numbers, so don't quote me on it, but I think it's 20% of the state's I don't remember if it's overdoses or over opioid related overdose deaths take place in Boston, and I'm sure that Somerville and Cambridge have high amounts. And Somerville is right there on the border. We act like these issues are these cities exclusively, and they're not. These are where a lot of people end up. It's where services are. And as for BINJ did a huge series, like 18 stories, I think, on homelessness in Cambridge and some in Somerville. And what we really learned is that a lot of the population that is north of the river is afraid to be in Boston because it's so treacherous. Although the shelters can be so violent, so that's the population that's going up
Yep.
there. And so I think compassion is always in order, but particularly in this case, there are a lot of people who, and sure they're not from there, but if you're from Winchester, there's not a lot going on in the way of services.
Certainly, when I was homeless, I didn't want to leave, the Harvard Square area, for example. For Boston, that would never have occurred to me. Like it's just was way better. But as as the Mass and Cass situation, gets the scene down there gets periodically cleaned out, people just jump on the train and end up in Davis, right?
And
Yeah.
Central, it does seem like it's a red line thing at this point.
Sure. Although Central
Yeah.
is a long-standing, kind of homeless community, like it's been kind of like it is for a long
There's
time.
services
So-
there, there's a lot.
well, yeah, yeah,
True.
and it's always been a
And
bit
there's-
sketchier.
Yes.
What?
There are also services in Davis Square now. The Somerville Homeless Coalition is there,
Yeah,
and they're
that's
trying
right.
to help folks. And also, there's a church on College Ave that wants to open a shelter that would be accessible to people with disabilities. And a group of neighbors is suing to stop them.
That's
And
correct.
that's complicated. Again, it's easy to demonize the neighbors and say, if they're just NIMBY folks, but it will affect their quality of life, and it would be best for everybody to discuss it. I mean, they say that they're not opposed to it; they just are opposed to the way that it was done without getting input from the community. Normally in Somerville, if you put in a new house or a new business, not a new business, but if you do any kind of development, you need to get buy-in from the community. You have community meetings, and apparently perhaps that wasn't done. I don't know, but that's what some people say. So it's complicated and it's difficult, and it's been my feeling for some time now that we on the progressive left shouldn't be battering one another under these circumstances where we're all under attack from the regime and the neo-fascist movement in this country. We should come together and try to work together and not fight each other so much. That's my opinion.
Well, and I know you know quite a bit about Somerville politics in particular, and we worked together on BINJ's spin-off project for a time, the Somerville Wire, where you covered these very issues.
Yes, I wrote for the Somerville Wire. I also wrote after that for Cambridge Day for about a year and a half, focusing on Somerville. Yes, I have strong feelings about Somerville after all these years, but I also have a lot of knowledge about Somerville as well as Cambridge, and so I feel like I have a good background to take on this new assignment. And we will cover Boston to some extent, but I don't really feel that we have the same kind of expertise on Boston. So I think we're focusing I like to say we focus on Greater Cambridge.
Yeah, which is a funny way of putting it, because it certainly could have ended up that Cambridge was the big capital and Boston wasn't, but that did not come to pass, despite all the money and power in Cambridge to this day. Although
Now they like it, I'm sure.
yeah, they do, although the federal administration is doing its level best to knock some of that power and privilege down a couple of pegs, and not for good reasons either. I don't think any of us would argue that, like, Harvard and MIT could stand to run their operations somewhat differently than they do. These are the long conversation, of course, but having a federal government that's running roughshod over centuries of jurisprudence and practice and common sense is not how I certainly would have wanted any kind of reform to happen to institutions that effectively run Cambridge, certainly. And it could be argued, play a big role in running Massachusetts as well, right?
Certainly
and have,
Harvard. Mm-hmm.
yeah,
Right.
So, and do you cover like MIT at all, or is it best to just like leave that aside on your show? I mean, your show's only just restarted, so it's like too early to ask. But what are you thinking?
Back in the old days, the previous iterations of the local news, we would have MIT students who were regulars who would come and talk about MIT issues. We don't have that yet, but we're just getting restarted, and I'm looking for them. I'm finding it more difficult to find progressive MIT students. I know they're there somewhere. Feel free to get in touch with me if you're out there.
Yeah, seriously,
You're
folks.
you're too close to the Sloan School over there. Maybe like go off to like where the creative stuff is happening. Like,
I mean, I worked over there in and around MIT for some time myself, and I have a big soft spot for that school too, even though I never officially attended, although there was a period when the administration actually thought I was a grad student there. And they used to have a big bulletin board. I'm serious, in the early 90s when I was running New Liberation News Service out of the MIT Thistles, the former progressive newspaper there that students ran. I was running,
which is no longer in existence.
It is not, and when I was running my international wire service out of there with MIT people, and sometimes we get in the press for what we were doing, and they would put on the bulletin board in Building 7, for those of you who know where that is, it's on Mass Ave with giant columns, like it's a neoclassical kind of looking building. And there was this bulletin board for community stuff, and that was one of the places where they would say Jason Pramas G, which is how they say grad student, was in the Boston Globe this week. It was pretty funny. But I do recognize.
No, go ahead.
I do recognize that MIT does bad things too, and so inevitably, and they've also suppressed student protest and community protest even recently, especially
Very
since
recently, especially regarding Gaza. It was very bad last year. What they banned the main group that was advocating for justice in Palestine, and it's only getting worse now because they're afraid of being labeled anti-Semitic, which is hilarious when you look at the Trump administration and how really anti-Semitic they are, and how they've got these Christian nationalists and white supremacists right there in the White House.
Yeah,
but
they
call us anti-Semitic.
The most terrifying, all I think is that scene in Handmaid's Tale television show where they're like hang the professor from that like column at MIT. If you've never seen it, I don't recommend it if you have to walk around there, because it puts chills straight up my spine, especially these days. But for MIT, I mean, they're fully complicit in every horrible thing ever. I mean, and that's really barely an exaggeration. At the same time, I would say I've always respected the fact that the school has its own snobbery. It's not the same as it's Harvard, and everybody else has a different. It's not the preppy, rich. It's snobbery. It's really a more dare I say more of a merit-based system but strange characters and the things that I've seen there over the years and the people who are in the woodwork and certainly part of that woodwork is WMBR and I think the quirkiness of that campus. What's that guy who used to be like the professor Joe? So he was like the professor, like he communicated. Oh, they used to send like sonogram rhythm. What is it, to the moon or
Ito, not
what?
the disgraced Joey Ito
No, this guy used to
from the
send.
Media Lab.
I don't know.
We don't want to talk about that
He
story at all.
he was a dishwasher at the Plow and Stars, and he had one leg.
Sorry, no, I don't
There's
know
a
who that was.
documentary about him. It's called Me plus the God plus the Earth plus Joe. I'll figure it out.
Yeah, I didn't know this cat, surprisingly.
Oh, really?
But no. I think the one leg thing sounds familiar.
Yeah,
and you said he's at the Bow and Arrow Pub?
Joe, I'll find
I
it.
must have known him. He was, but well, anyway, I was going to say,
Well,
I think there's a direct.
A couple of things before we're done, just to respond to that. It is either the number 1 or number 2 defense contractor in the country.
Yep.
So they make a lot of things that go boom.
Yep.
And they're responsible for a lot of death and destruction. But they've always been open to alternative viewpoints and have just a broad variety. And of course, certain departments like linguistics are known for being cutting edge on the radical edge of scholarship. So it's a really interesting mix. And, they focus on scholarship and rigorous academia, and that can include the left as well as the right. And the other thing I really needed to say was, even though I'm sure I'm not required to on this live stream, it's so ingrained in me. I just feel the need to say that my views and opinions are not necessarily those of staff and management of WMBR, the Technology Broadcasting Corporation, or the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Thank you.
But
wow,
they could be the views of BINJ though. So that's cool.
I would say they are the views of BINJ because
I think so too. Yeah,
you pay me, so I guess so.
Yeah, small and inoffensive, sort of stipend, basically. Yeah, we pay you, and we pay ourselves similarly.
Yeah, well,
but I do think
so. Yes,
I do think you kind of answered your own question about why left-wing students aren't coming out of the woodwork right now. The environment is not what it has been at MIT or anywhere else in our lifetimes, certainly.
Oh, it's just insane. It's like the McCarthy era, but
yeah,
it's a different world where you type something on your little machine and everybody in the world can see it, and AI can track it. And then there's all the, the facial recognition software. So you can be tracked, and there is no, as in 1984, they're always watching.
Well, one thing that would be fun for, the MIT news show, or us, or BINJ and your MIT news show, MBR news show together, to do is to probably talk to some of the folks at MIT who have basically been at the core of developing the technology of our lovely new surveillance state that we're all in the middle of 24/7, 365 now, and see what they think. Like, was this what they intended to do? Like, what, I am honestly curious. I've known quite a few people who've done what used to be called defense research. Now I guess it's fashionable to call it war research again, which is at least more honest, but I would like to see more interviews of some folks like that, because we have tons of them, not just at MIT, but also at Harvard, also at many other universities and other independent institutions around the region, some of which spun off from MIT, like Draper Labs, right? And ask them, like, well, is this what, is this the society that you all wanted? Did you want the tech that you were working on to be deployed the way it's been deployed in many other countries for a long time, and now is very definitely being deployed here? I'm curious. I don't know.
Well, you got a reporter? Send them in.
We got some reporters. Yeah.
Well, then
But
get a story idea. Get that reporter to go do it.
yeah, sure, we could do that. And is there anything else that you wanted to mention about what you're doing there, or with BINJ, or anything before we end this particular episode?
Well, no, just people should pay attention. Now is the time. Now people are under a lot of stress and they're really scared and anxious about the world, and it's easy to just retreat into whatever your private world is, but it's pretty important for people to stay involved and stay aware of what's going on. Stay
Yeah.
alert.
Agreed. Well, thank you, Linda Pinkow, for coming on the show tonight, and of course for working with us all this time that you work with us as well. It's been great and continues to be. And thank you, Chris. And Chris talked at the beginning of the show about our upcoming fundraiser on November 8th, 2 to 4 p.m. at First Parish Church in Harvard Square. You're going to be seeing that poster around the area, and we will be putting a lot of stuff online for folks to check out. To buy tickets and attend. Tickets will be $50 to $100, and we'd like to sell the place out before we even start. But we are looking really forward to doing that show, and we're looking forward to hearing the comedians make us laugh about media and politics and everything else. So anyway, thanks for checking out tonight's 4th episode of BINJ Live, and we'll be back next Tuesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Bye, everybody. And now we got to freeze for a second, because when I end the stream, sometimes it cuts us off. So we're going to everyone just do this for a second. Bye, everybody.